Hello, and welcome back to the campfire. Kinda.
Yeah. Changing up a few things today.
Yeah, we're changing up a few things. Well, for those of you who don't know, usually we would talk about people's campaigns and all sorts of other bits and pieces, like their characters in campaigns and tabletop RPGs. But this time we're going to do something a little different. The reason as to why we're changing up the formula is, well, we'll talk about it in a future video, with which will be full of a few different updates for the channel, as well as a few different updates for the project. But one of the updates is kind of one of the reasons why we're going to do this video today. So I'm joined by Alex and Kane.
Hello.
Our guest is here once again.
And we're going to be doing something a little different. Instead of talking about powers or people's campaigns, we're actually going to be talking about characters, or building them, specifically, within the system. Now, we understand that at this point in time, people might not fully understand what we're really talking about, because the rules haven't been fully out there. But as part of one of the updates, you'll sort of understand why we're doing this now, and even why we'll be doing more of these in the future. But without any further ado, let's begin. So, using the Animite Tales system, we already know one thing. There's a lot of superpowers. I mean, a lot. So, we're able to make quite a few different interesting characters. For instance, you have Rakia, the Huskonian, a mutant girl who has super speed and dexterity, hyper-intelligence, and incredible perceptive wisdom. You've even got characters like Talos, who are pretty much Frankenstein's monster, if Frankenstein's monster also had the powers of gravity at his disposal. And I guess, well, where to begin really with the craziness that is Adrian B. Crawford, a wasp person who also can, upon touching things, break them down on a molecular level and pretty much build them back up in any shape or form that they'd like, so long as it's made out of the same material. But today we're going to be talking about how to build specific characters from other shows and other forms of fiction. So, would someone like to present what we're doing this now?
We're going to talk about the Avatar and how to build one. At least that was what I was led to believe.
Yes, no, yeah, you're right, yeah.
Oh, good. I'm not in the wrong meeting then.
False. Leave this meeting.
Fool. No, so yeah, it's going to be the Avatar. So, Avatars and Avatar The Last Airbender and Legend of Korra. If you don't know it, then I'm sorry.
You go and watch it, it's good.
Yeah, it's very good. It's very good.
It's like on every platform of all time. I really don't know why you don't know about it. Honestly, that's a failing on your part. Go and watch it.
Alright, calm down.
Maybe you shouldn't insult the viewers. We kind of do those.
Right.
No, so, you love it. You love it.
Okay, moving on very swiftly. So, we already know roughly about most people who don't know, but let's say, for instance, if they don't actually know what this is, we'll go ahead. In the world of Avatar, people basically have elemental telekinetic abilities that allow them to control one of the four elements: air, water, earth, fire. There are a few extra special abilities and bonuses thrown in depending on which one they are, but we're just going to be sort of focusing about the fact that they can manipulate or bend the elements to their will, usually based on when they're doing certain types of martial arts forms. But we'll get to that at some point. The Avatar, on the other hand, has two specific bonuses that, well, quite frankly, are a little different than most. First one is the Avatar is supposed to have the ability to master all four of the elements. So, pretty much having all 4 of the different elemental abilities at once, enabling them to be able to airbend, waterbend, earthbend, and firebend, aka multiple types of elemental kinesis. On top of this, we also have that they are supposed to be the spiritual bridge between the mortal world and the spirit world. And pretty much an extra thing chucked in is because they are this bridge, every time that they die, they are reincarnated into the next body, and they can speak to their past lives. Well, so let's talk about this for a second. We won't necessarily talk about building Korra or Aang, per se, just yet. We're just going to talk about how viable the Avatar build is. So, I'd like to hear both of you, both of your opinions as to how exactly you could do so.
Well, it would definitely have to be an Omega, I think, if we want, just to cover all of the elements. Like, the simplest thing that I can think of is it's the Havoc Child build where that have control over all of the elements, correct? Have I got the terms right?
Well, the Havoc Child don't have the ability to manipulate, but they sort of similar to that of being able to generate it just ever so much off of the skin of their own body. Like they can heat up and create flames off of the surface of their skin, lightning, radiant energy, ice. But yeah, they can't necessarily generate it further than that, and they can't control other elements outside of their own body.
I guess in a weird way, actually, in the weirdest possible sense of this, if that's off the table, then I guess that the Avatar could be like a very unique attribute chemistry manipulator, because
Okay.
you'd have coverage of all the elements. Then you'd actually be able to generate and manipulate it. That would give you full coverage. Of course, there would be some, there would of course have to be some limitations to it if you wanted a true Avatar build. Like you can't just like all of the things that chemistry is, like you literally can do anything with everything. You probably wouldn't be able to crossbreed things, or maybe you'll be able to. I'm not entirely sure, but I think chemistry, my gut instinct, that would be the full coverage of it.
Okay. What about yourself, Kane?
I'm not. I'm not entirely sure because there aren't a lot of powers that grant full control of those things. I think chemistry is a good one. A really abstract way of doing it that I was thinking of is a unique version of amalgam, where you were just stuck with the essential 4 powers, which would obviously be aerokinesis, terrakinesis, hydrokinesis, and pyrokinesis. So you'd have those powers, but you wouldn't be able to use anyone else's. Should probably explain what amalgam is, shouldn't I?
Well, no, yeah. I mean, so for those of you who don't know what amalgam is, an amalgam is pretty much just a combined amount of multiple people's powers or a combined amount of multiple people. The superpower amalgamation enables the user to, whilst they're within a certain range of other people who have powers, to basically amalgamate them. It's kind of like a weirder form of copying, where you can have everyone's powers around you, but the downside to this is if no one has powers, you don't either. Also, it only works on the closest people within that range, and it only activates during the time that you're actually in mortal danger or in certain moments of adrenaline. Usually, that means that in the game, it's during combat. But they do get this ability called Amalgam Mode, where they can activate it outside of combat temporarily if they need to. So they could technically use it to start fights as well. But yeah, I kind of like that. So you've both gone for sort of unique attribute versions of both of those powers, both amalgamation and chemistry.
Yeah. Because
Okay.
originally I was going to think like Omega, because Omega are kind of meta powers essentially within the game, and if anything's if anybody's got meta powers, it's
if you made like a custom made one, you could do it. But with the existing ones,
Yeah, exactly.
I don't think you wouldn't be able to get the same thing, because also the elements of the Havoc Child are different to that of the Avatar.
I mean,
Yeah.
I was actually surprised that you said unique attribute and then you went chemistry. Because honestly, when you said unique attribute chemistry, I was thinking, oh, I thought you were going to say unique attribute Havoc Child and basically just alter
Oh yeah, that
some
too.
of the
Yeah,
different
as well.
things. But okay,
If that's
well,
the table.
that's where you're both wrong. I'm going to say the best one is you don't need a unique attribute and you don't need to go Omegan. Chemistry and pyrokinesis. Why pyrokinesis, you might be thinking? Well, chemistry can allow you to manipulate any liquid, solid, or gas. Well, we already know that one of the main effects of earthbending is eventually the ability to manipulate metal. Second thing is aerokinesis covers any and all gases and air. And third one is liquid. Well, technically, as long as it's not blood, it could technically count as any liquid that is a chemical, not a biological and biochemical thing. So, there you go, all of those, but why then pyrokinesis? Well, obviously, pyrokinesis is the only thing that doesn't fit under that category. So, you've then got all four of the elements. The main thing with that is also you could then go atmospheric transmutation, full-on buffs, except from the last ability, known as plasma transmutation, which enables you to turn any fire or lightning into, well, vice versa. Fire can turn into lightning, lightning can turn into fire, which is one of the special abilities under the Firebenders. Boom. Plus, just throwing this out there, the atmospheric ability allows you to also have a range of 10 times whatever your normal range is, and if you generate fire and then use plasma transmutation to manipulate said fire, rather than just transmuting it, you can then expand your fire range with your pyrokinesis. And if you also want to be even more like it, you could use temperature control, which is under pyrokinesis, which is the mutation, which enables you to cool things down and even freeze things to the point of which that they become ice. So you can have both hot and cold, and therefore you can turn any liquid into ice, gas, or even, any liquid into a solid like ice, into any kind of gas like steam, and then finally back into any liquid. You have complete control over any of the 3 states, if not 4 states of matter, and therefore all 4 elements, and then the bonus ones if you also like metal bending, lightning bending, and I guess combustion bending.
I guess the only real downside is that you won't be able to bloodbend. Under it, you said that.
I mean,
but
you could argue that you'd want it, but let's be honest, if you're trying to make an avatar build, probably wouldn't want bloodbending.
Yeah.
So
I know, because that's naughty.
Let's think of some of the downsides with what all 3 of us have already said. So we'll go backwards from you, Kane. What's the downside with yours? So you've already said the amalgam thing, but what else do you feel like you might have missed? Or might become problematic, sorry.
Well, I mean, obviously the thing is with that is it obviously doesn't fit any of the other spiritual aspects that the Avatar can eventually do. Which I think kind of all of them have the problem with, is like obviously like the energy bending thing, which you've got that, and then obviously the whole passing down, getting reincarnated, and being able to speak to your previous predecessors. So a lot of the spiritual stuff is obviously kind of way harder to do, because obviously that kind of goes outside the basic boundaries of any of those abilities. But apart from that, obviously, I'm not too sure, to be fair.
I'd say, again, if you're basing it off of that unique attribute system, I guess you could always have it that, like, it's an amalgam of multiple powers and multiple abilities that you're choosing. And, it's that thing of, the downside to this is that you'll never be able to amalgamate any other further powers than the ones that you have stated. Maybe even when you get buffs or abilities that further increase it, you're just taking other people's, like, power level versions of it. Like, the 4 different elemental manipulation abilities that I have is, as you said, hydrokinesis, aerokinesis, pyrokinesis, and terrakinesis. All of the 4 different bending abilities. But then later, maybe you might say, okay, I'm gonna level up, and you either have it that your amalgam mode dice is higher, or your your other thing, which is your power sources, have increased, and you could go, well, I'm gonna have another power source which is electrokinesis, so that I can have lightning bending. Or you could go, well, I'll have telepathy because I need the whole energy bending and spirit aspect ability. And you sort of go on that. And the way that you could do it, which is also kind of interesting, is you could have it that, like, because the way that obviously we build the game is that the more powers that someone has with amalgamation, or the more Animite weakness they have, which at that point it could be that thing of, well, as the avatar, as someone who has technically amalgamation of these 4, you therefore have 4 or 5 times Animite damage. And then each time that you get a new aspect of your powers, like the spirit stuff, the lightning manipulation, the metal bending, say for instance, the energy bending, you get all of this stuff and you keep getting more and more. That then increases the weakness to Animite that you get. And on top of that, all of them are only as powerful as the current level that you're at. So if you get to level 3, all of the powers that you currently have amalgamated are level 3. So you could sort of still have that aspect of the spirit thing, so long as you were, your narrator, your DM was sort of going back and forth and allowing of that. But that's a very interesting way that you could go about it. I don't know if that sort of ties into something that sort of makes it any more interesting.
I was thinking maybe in, like, because if we were going to do an attribute like the avatar state, it could be as well that you're so vulnerable in the avatar state that's also, whilst giving you this big buff, it also increases the damage done via Animite and all kinds of attacks.
It's funny
and
that you
layups.
say about the avatar state, because on one hand, in the one that I said, I actually said that the avatar state would have been either a willpower or a willpower, or an apostle, or an SPMA, where it's just a strenuous form, where it's like temporarily you have ridiculous levels of increased power, but maybe like you lose the vitality system, so it means that like someone can actually hurt you and do injuries to you, or even having it that, like, if you get hit past the point of 0,
the whole major risk of it is that if you die in the avatar state for all avatars,
die
it's
for real.
basically the equivalent. Yeah, it's the permadeath where they don't ever get reincarnated again. So
there's that, but also, I mean, you could also have it like another aspect where it's like, if you go to 0, you just die, rather than going into that point where it's like, oh, you're just unconscious. Because a lot of tabletop RPGs, including our own, has it that you have to go to a certain amount of health in the minuses, which usually equal to your maximum health. So if you have 40, the minimum that you can ever have is 39, because the point that you get to 40 minus 40 or below, that's it, your character's dead. So you could just have it that whilst in that state, if you get to 0 or lower, you just die. There is no anything about that, and the only way to come back is someone literally bringing you back to life by using, I don't know, spirit water, some kind of weird resuscitation, or some kind of literal resurrection ability. So I mean, that could be for the amalgam thing. What about the things that you sort of missed for yours? By the way, I have to apologise if anyone can hear large banging and sort of explosion noises. My boiler is playing up, and I'm currently in the same room as it, so I'm hoping that it will be okay. But yeah, so I apologise for that.
A lot more tense. Is Joe's boiler going to explode? Is this the end of the podcast? The problem I have with chemistry manipulation for the avatar state, I mean, you're right with Pyrokinesis, that would be solved by, actually, because I didn't really consider, like, that gives you full coverage if you are an anomaly with that. I didn't really consider that, because just chemistry manipulation on its own is kind of a depowered form. It's just kind of nerfed without that, which is already covered. And, well, I'm not really, I don't know, chemistry I think is just, maybe it's just my thought associations, but it just seems kind of like not spiritual, kind of the same with that amalgam is, and it needs I don't know. It just doesn't. It feels sort of clinical, like going into the clinical thing, and I don't think that that's really what the Avatar is about. It's more sort of like vibing with the spirit world and with your martial arts techniques.
Yeah. Okay. I mean, I'd say with mine is the same issue. Like the only true connection that they'd have is to the pyrokinesis, because each and every single one of the different connected abilities, pyrokinesis, hydrokinesis, stuff like that, they all have at least one ability that personally connects them to their own element. Hydrokinesis has the ability where they can use the ability purify. So when they get some water, they can actually completely remove all the toxic elements within inside of it. So it's just pure water. Pyrokinesis has heat sense, and it enables the user to sense any different types of fluctuations in heat, like thermal vision. Telekinesis allows the use of endosense, which allows them to sort of like literally sense things outside of their own. Outside of the sort of not endosense, sorry, exosense, as well as terrasense, which allows them to sense anything that is making vibrations within the earth, and even being able to sense anything that is made of the earth. You've then got electrokinesis, which also has not electrokinesis, aerokinesis, which also has the ability to enable the user to move faster, and also enable themselves to have an ability called aerobatics, which increases their ability of moving around, and another ability later called float, which enables them to sort of make themselves lighter than air, or as roughly lighter, like as if they are almost as light as air. So they all have their own sort of little abilities that make them sort of interesting and different. But yeah, I'd honestly have to say that the most legitimate one would probably, like as I said, the most legitimate one is obviously the one that I've done because I haven't got any unique attributes. But the closest one to the build would probably have to be the unique attribute amalgam one, because technically the unique attribute amalgam one could literally just be preset. Because one of the main things about the Avatar is not necessarily supposed to be a fair character. And the other argument I was going to make to this is, in amalgamation, they have two abilities. I am all, which enables the user to have multiple abilities from multiple people, which would not make sense with this unique attribute version. And gluttonous form, where it's a temporary, like, super mode, where it combines all of the abilities together and amplifies the user's power by a short period of time. However, after they've used it, they won't be able to use that form or mode for a short period of time. You could then basically have that, whilst they're in this mode, they have a weakness, and that's the.
I mean, to be fair, it kind of would be kind of like their Avatar state, to be fair.
Yeah,
exactly. And so, in all honesty, if I was a DM and someone came to me with this and it's like, so I want this unique attribute amalgam thing that you were talking about, I'd have to be like, if it fits in the campaign, even though that it sounds stupidly OP, I kind of wouldn't mind it too much, because there are still certain aspects, like the amalgam mode thing, people would actually still have to roll to activate amalgam mode to be like, okay, I can use any of these 4 different elements now. And obviously in gluttonous form, that's the only point when you can use all 4 elements at once. Because again, you'd have to have, like, in the terms of the dice rolls, 1 dice to suddenly use earth, 1 dice to use fire. You couldn't just go roll 1 and now I can use all 4, and you wouldn't be able to have them that you can use all 4 as a free action. Not unless if you had some kind of like combo going on where it's an SPMA where you go, okay, hit someone with rock, now hit someone with water, now hit someone with fire, now hit someone with air. Like, you could do that, but again, that would, be more based on combo.
Yeah. That would be definitely more like what we see in the show. Like in the it is easier to have these use all of the things at once in the Avatar state. Just everything is just sort of amplified. So if we just say that with the I am all, you're using a sort of form. You're basically, it's like a it's like a once in a battle sort of thing.
Yeah, the gluttonous form is a once per battle ability. Yeah.
And then you could like really flex and have your Ozin fight. But then but most of the time, as we see in the show, they use either the Avatar has a favorite element to use that they're used to, or they use just 2 in combination at a time. So and yeah, I'd say that works more with what we conceive of the Avatar. I agree.
I think the power itself is kind of more spiritual, because obviously chemistry is a very scientific
Yeah,
Yeah, as you
exactly.
said, very
power.
clinical, as you
Yeah,
said.
well, amalgam itself is kind of, I guess, in a
To
way
a
you could
sense,
argue
it's
it's
rather spiritual, yeah.
yeah, because you're taking the aspects of people, not physically, you are just taking the aspects of kind of a part of them, and then being able to use their abilities because of that.
Also, I mean, literally, the Avatar is quite literally an amalgam of multiple people over hundreds of thousands of centuries. Technically, even one, who's the first Avatar, yeah, I know, clever naming, he is an amalgam between himself and the light spirit that granted him the ability to hold all four of the different elemental bending abilities. So, going based off of that, you could technically state that amalgam is actually the closest form of it. Even if you were to go about saying, like, oh, the backstory behind the amalgamation ability is actually people passing it down, and, people eventually having it where someone dies and then, it goes over to the next person, and each time they're just leveling it up and building up and so on and so forth. When they eventually unlock the telepathy ability, they can go into the spirit world or whatever, and be in that moment where they can actually speak to previous players who have had this ability, or at least previous characters who have had this ability. And yeah, that could be quite interesting, to be honest. In the terms of their stats and in terms of their trades, obviously SPMA, and I guess depending on the way that you look at it, you could have it that they are hand-to-hand, martial arts,
Well, it would be, in my opinion, it would be different forms of martial arts for each one.
Yeah.
Because
Okay. So yeah, like the earthbending. Is it not Muay
yeah, because
Thai?
if you look at it, they all have dramatically different ways in the way they ask you to move your body. Because
Yeah.
with Earth, obviously, it's a lot more rigid. All your movements are like sort of one based, but every movement has significant power into it.
I believe it's something like similar to praying mantis style.
Oh yeah, we went
That.
over this in the martial arts abilities we did when we went through like what all of the the different Avatar martial art forms were based on.
Check
And one
that
was like,
out.
yeah, check that out. It's got water has flowing movements, and like with earthbending you have like a very clear
Rigid,
and very
strong,
strong yeah,
precise.
rigid.
Yeah.
Uh, and like with I think praying mantis is supposed to be related to the firebending because it's like precise and aggressive strikes.
Yeah, that
From
sounds about right. Yeah.
yeah, that sounds about right. And
I
like,
I can't remember if one of them is because I know it's like one of them's based on Tai Chi, which is the waterbending. One
oh
of
yeah,
them's
that's the
based
one.
on Kung Fu, which is either firebending or earthbending, and then the other one is based on something else.
No, I know what it is. It's like it's a defensive style, which is about like flowing movements and like it is like it's not about like striking. It's Pyrokinesis. It's like a pacifist move where you basically just like sort of float around with movement around your opponent. I think that isn't part of Kung Fu.
I believe
Howling
it's
Temple?
fluidity where you're constantly moving, you don't stop during battle.
Yeah, yeah.
But
I don't think this is what I was taught, but I did kung fu for a bit, and they teach you something, or at least the teaching I did, because there's many teachings. They teach you the idea of basically during battles how you don't ever stop moving. Your body is constantly sort of flowing. Every movement goes into the next, and it's natural. So I mean, I don't think I don't really remember because it's been years since I've done that. But
Yeah, I think that's
I,
just a tangential point. Like it would have to be separate, martial
yeah,
arts stuff and SPMA because if you put it all in SPMA,
uh,
you've only got like 10 levels to go in
okay,
there.
here's where I
Yeah.
have to disagree. It would definitely have to be only one SPMA because that's how it works. But I would definitely agree with the concept of perhaps having it that a lot of the different you have four different elemental style martial arts, which work without them, but then at least at one point, one of them has a usage style that goes with, roll this, I don't know, say for instance, roll Muay Thai with water bending. I'm obviously wrong, but you know what I mean. Like, roll Tai Chi with hydrokinesis. Roll Kung Fu.
Well, I think it would be more just techniques that you would be able to you also use next to your aerokinetic. Let's say aerokinesis. Like you were talking about, you'd have like a movement one where it's just like you move quickly, but then maybe you use one of your aerokinetic abilities to make yourself lighter. And thus, thanks to the martial arts, you're moving very quickly and evading every attack. And you're not stopping.
Yeah, they don't always have to be. Yeah, like the techniques are sort of don't always have to cross over, but they can be utilized together.
Yeah, it's meant to basically almost to a sense amplify your power, not because it's literally getting stronger, but because now you're moving in the sense closest to that of the element you're using.
Yeah.
And thus you're more in tangent with it. Like with fire, it'd be a lot of like aggressive pinpoint strikes, but then you'd mix that with your pyrokinetic ability to get far more effect out of it.
I definitely agree. But as I said, I agree with that. I just don't agree with the multiple SPMAs.
Well, you can't do that anyway.
Because you just can't do that.
However, you could make a lot of SPMAs.
However, this is what does create the Avatar's journey, which is you get taught more SPMAs because you create up to 10 SPMAs, but you can be taught infinite amount of trades and proficiencies. You have a finite amount that you can have in the terms of how many proficiencies and trades you can have, but you can have an infinite amount of proficiency and trade techniques under those proficiencies and trades. So technically, you could literally do it where it's like you make your own 10 and then you go off and you're like, okay, I want to learn this technique of yours. Okay, well, it's basically pretty simple. I create some fire, wrap it up in a ball and throw it away and then it explodes. Awesome, I'm now going to try that and, etc., etc. But yeah, I mean that would be quite an interesting sight to see. I think we've all sort of like made this vote now. Kane's build is probably the best build, even though that it does require a unique attribute and very well might be a headache for a DM, and they might say no. But I think that is the best build with the most legitimacy towards it.
I've never thought that I'd actually agree, because Amalgam is just one of the powers, like, no offense to the Amalgam users or whatever, but it's one of the things that I slept on, really. Like, I just figured, it's just not really...
You say that, no one's used the power, really.
There's that like those. Remember there was a different campaign, which we didn't televise. There was that really cool villain and stuff. It was like, oh yeah, he's really cool. No one played him. But it's like, it's like, sure, I'm more sort of talking to Joe because he's played an Amalgam character by being the DM, But it's like, yeah, it's no offense to that, but it's like, yeah, this could actually really work and be very interesting and stuff. And it's like, it's really sort of like, yeah, it does need a bit of tweaking, it's like definitely homebrew thing, but yeah, I'd play that. Hell yeah.
I'm glad that's the part you were found hard to believe with, and not that I came up with a good idea. I was not gonna lie, I was also thinking that that's where you were going with it. I was like, oh no, don't tell me that you're gonna say something super controversial, and let's be quite frank, pretty darn mean.
No, I appreciate you, Kane, and the ideas that you bring to the table.
Well, Joe never said that to me, so thanks.
I mean, you're wrong, but okay. I was actually going to say, like, one of the funniest parts about this was that I Kane knows this so much. I love amalgamation, but I hate that no one plays it, and I also don't want to overuse it as a DM, so I barely touch it. Because anytime I use it, I know someone is going to give me that stat of, oh yeah, of course you're using an amalgamation as this boss fight. I'm like, oh, you know what? No, next time I won't then. And, like, I barely touch it. So Kane obviously knows how much I love amalgam. So obviously I love this idea. It's brilliant.
Yeah, but you like powers that allow you to use multiple powers anyway. So.
I do, but I only like them if they're interesting, and that's interesting. Like, that is way more interesting because it's this, as you said, it's more of a spiritual journey, and it's also like, I'd allow this, providing that the campaign setting made sense, I'd allow it. I don't know.
I have the perfect setting for it, though. Like,
What's
this is
that?
here's my argument. This is my argument. Remember when we talked to the My Hero Haskonia campaign, like where we're all in sort of superpowered Hogwarts? The character who will play the Avatar character is like a legacy student. Like all of the other, Avatar-like characters have gone to this school, to learn stuff. And of course, they've got a bit of a chip on their shoulder because it's like, yeah, they're going to be expected to do really well because they have this incredible power and it is their destiny. But oh no, they're also kind of a dick about it and also incredibly naive. So hilarity ensues.
Well, in that case, if you are offering, you can definitely play that character if you'd like.
Yay!
But I will tell
finally-
you this: by the sounds of how we specified it, it is going to be an admin nightmare.
Yeah, I mean, well, again, don't worry about it. I'm just thinking that would be very cool, but I like to keep you sane. So tell me if it's not okay. And we'll find another character that I'll probably be. I get distracted by good characters. Like, you can just dangle some shiny keys in front of me, and I'll change my mind. But
fair enough.
I'm not gonna lie, that does sound like a real fun build, though.
Yeah, go for it. I mean,
Yeah.
I'm trying to be a little bit more allowing of if a character concept is interesting enough, I don't really necessarily care if it's overpowered. I mean, literally, I've okayed Nathan, so I can't not okay something that is actually probably
people don't know who that character is.
Okay, a guy who's basically the equivalent of All for One. There we go. And if you don't know who that is, sucks to be you. Basically, it was a power stealer. Every time that he killed someone with powers, he could steal their powers and store them up in himself, and he could use them. He could store as many as he wanted, but the more he stored up, the higher his Animite weakness would be. And eventually, I think he had like 17 powers, so he had about like... And he started off with 2 powers, so 17 plus those was 19. So at that point, he then basically had a 19 times multiplier. So if someone had done even like any more than 2 points of Animite damage, his entire health was gone because he didn't. I don't think he even had 40 health yet. So yeah, he burst like a meat balloon if that ever happened to him. But he was still one of the most powerful characters. But he was not a fighter. He was more of a person who experimented with powers. And I absolutely love that character. And it was well balanced enough that I said, okay. Moving on. I would say if, however, there was not a nice narrator who said yes, I think that the only way that you could get away with it is the one that I said. I firmly believe this. So in the terms of narrator allowance, Kane's one is the best. In the terms of narrator being super strict, no, you have to base it off of the actual power system and you can't do X, Y, and Z, and you have to base it off of this. I'm not allowing homebrew. I still think that my anomaly build is probably, the only fit for that one in the terms of sticking with the build and also having as much accuracy to the power set as possible. Sadly, not the spiritual aspect of it, but I guess you could always have some kind of willpower stuff where you have a little bit of mind and spirit going on where like you're sort of a bit of a hippie. But it's not going to be as great as Amalgamation, which can technically get all 4 of the elements as well as electricity and also telepathy and maybe throw in a bit of metal manipulation, But yeah, I still stand by it that like that's how I'd go about it. I'd say in the next set of episodes that we do for these, I'd probably say that that's what we'll do. We'll see. Okay, how much can people get? How accurate can you get to it? What would you have to do so? How much would you have to bend over backwards to completely create this character or completely create this power set? and then how much allowance would be required for it versus then as close to a legitimate version as possible. So, like as closely accurate as possible versus a legitimate one. So, like, for instance, like a legitimate one would be, I know that it says he can like launch an attack to the moon, but there's no way that anyone would allow that, so we just have to have it that he's got a 10 meters radius. But it's still the same power, something like that, which would be kind of sad. But obviously, as I said, it's still a really good power set. And yeah, I think that's pretty much it on that. Is there anything else? I guess should we talk about how to make either of the other two, Aang and Korra, since those are the only two that show the most of their stuff?
Honestly, make them amalgam. I think. Weirdly enough, your build of chemistry manipulation and pyrokinesis, I immediately thought Avatar Roku for some reason. I don't know why, but it just seems like that would be a better fit for him.
Oh, I'm talking like we've already agreed that it was Kane's all the way, but what I'm talking about is like let's move the power set out of the way. How would you make the builds? Because I'm thinking Aang would be more dexterity, charisma, and wisdom. Korra would probably be more strength, con, and I'm gonna say strength, con, and I want to say she'd probably have okay charisma but really good intimidation.
Oh yeah, definitely. It'd be like she wouldn't have like it's weird because like her whole character arc is like she doesn't really have much diplomacy. She has to learn that. So it's like she has good intimidation and she can like get by in a conversation, but it's like she will have like minus diplomacy.
Definitely. That's what one of her flaws would definitely be is diplomacy. I'd say another one is finesse. Either finesse or stealth. Although I'd actually argue that it's more her flaw is finesse rather than stealth, because I think that she can be stealthy if she needs to.
I think she would have to. That would not be one of her top stats. I think like her top stat would be strength. And she would have a lot of brawler abilities.
Strength, hand to hand, and I have to be honest. Like strength and hand to hand would probably be the main ones. Animal Tamer as well, because obviously she can. Yeah. Although actually, then again, I don't know if she would actually have Animal Tamer, because she's only ever really been seen to really get on with one animal, which is her pet.
Yeah, it's kind of like with an apper sort of thing. It's like
those animals are kind of guaranteed because every avatar has basically also a spiritual animal with them.
However, the argument for this is that like Momo isn't that one. So that's
Momo
why I would say that. That's why I say that Aang is also like the penguin sledding thing, the weird eel, the seal things. He gets on quite well with a lot of animals, so I'd actually say that he'd have Animal Tamer, but it's more like an animal friendship proficiency. But she would have obviously like Brawler, and weirdly enough, I'd actually say that she would probably have multiple, obviously as we said, multiple styles of different the different martial arts that she would be in need of for each one of the different bending arts. But actually probably state that like she'd probably have really good ingenuity but really bad wisdom, in the terms of like she's really quite good at rolling ingenuity and understanding how to do the physical and practical aspects of the fighting and power side of her abilities. But in the terms of the spiritual and sometimes a little bit more of the technical aspects, she sort of has difficulty with. Because remember, a lot of the different types of bending, Aang actually, found a lot of it rather easy. It's just that his control over that was more based on his emotions, whereas she was quite fine with that. Korra was quite fine with the whole aspect until it came to the air, which is the more spiritual one. But yeah,
it's like it would be reversed in their cases. Like Aang would have problems with ingenuity, but he'd be going more on instinct, which be
he's more creative.
Yeah, he's creative. Whereas like Korra would just be not very good in that regard, but incredibly good with ingenuity and getting herself out of situations by understanding the technical aspect
I'd
of
also
it.
argue that he'd probably, like, being just a little bit more meta based on the actual gameplay, I'd also probably state that he's probably a lot luckier in a lot of aspects in terms of learning bending and stuff like that. Whereas, like, she would probably be the equivalent of kind of almost starting off with everything at, like, a relatively decent SP point. Or having it that, like, when you build her from level 0, you actually have it that she already started off with, like, you know, some pretty decent stats that enabled her to get, you know, get the tracks already on the ground and pretty much built up all the traction that they needed. So she'd just be powering through. But any of the stats that would be necessary for the airbending and the spiritual stuff, suddenly very malnourished and being quite a bit of a slog. Hence why I think that Aang was sort of more lucky in that aspect. He had a lot better control and activation of his powers, but it took him a lot longer to get the whole trade aspect down and actually mastering it. So I think it's kind of interesting to see it either way.
Also, like,
I'm sorry.
I also like both of those. You know, just thinking like, what to play.
What was it?
So no, I mean, I'm actually sold on the build now. Unfortunately, you know, this is my problem now. It's like, well, I'm gonna have to do it now, and I'm gonna make Joe's life a nightmare.
To be fair, I can help you with that. It's not that difficult. It's just more keeping track of things.
Yeah, I must say I have to keep track of a lot of things as well, just with Rakia, and she's got like, you know, nothing compared to that.
Yeah, I mean,
But it's really
Rakia is a little different in that certain terms. I mean, obviously, like Huskonians are, they are always difficult for new players. I always still find it funny that the first character that you ever came to me with was a Huskonian. So you had 3 powers, and they work off of a different system to the rest of the Superhuman and Anomaly and the Omegans. And I was like, oh, geez, okay. And then the second ever character that you played was an Anomaly, which is slightly more, if not roughly the same amount of admin, but it was a whole new system, as I said, because Huskonians are the most different than any other race. So then when you went off onto the thing, you're like, yeah, I think I'm going to go have a look at some of these superhuman powers. I was like, okay. And then you messaged me going, I'm going to be an anomaly. I was like, internal screaming.
Well, and I do apologize as well, because when I came in, I thought, yeah, I'm ready. And then we just started playing. It's like, I'm really not ready. It's really
I have so many questions.
Yeah.
But yeah, I would say the aspect of that build would be quite interesting. I would very much like to see it, especially in the My Hero Haskonia one. Yes, it's a joke based off of My Hero Academia. It's literally just basically the same concept of either X-Men or My Hero Academia, where people go to a school, or well, it's a university, and they will basically try and become heroes over like the campaign setting and defeat the baddies, or a set of baddies, or just defeat villains for each arc. But you've still got a couple of campaigns to go. You know what's funny? We actually thought that we were gonna storm through this, and we have actually done quite well. But we kind of run out of time here. Like genuinely, yeah. I'm looking at it. I'm like, we've been talking for about 48 minutes now. And we thought that we were going to go through 3 characters, so maybe not as maybe. Well, we did dive in a lot more in depth in this one than I think we thought we were going to, and I think that's quite good because I think in depth analysis is quite nice.
I mean, yeah, I think this is a pretty solid episode. To be honest, I think keep going like that, you know, rather
definitely.
than.
Anything to add, Kane? Was there anything else that you think that like we missed in the terms of this build or workshop?
No, I think it went pretty well.
I'd say in the terms of it, we obviously didn't talk about many of the downsides for this unique attribute. Obviously, the Animite damage is one of them, but I guess obviously losing the amalgamation.
It's mostly losing access to every power that you don't have.
Yeah, yeah. Also, still stating that none of them can be accessed until, like, you're out. You're at level 3, because when you get to level 3, you can then use the amalgam mode, which means that you can then roll for temporary amount of time how long you're able to use your powers outside of combat. So yeah, I mean, also, like, I don't know if that's necessarily downsides, or even if it would be. I don't know. It's kind of a tricky one, isn't it? I guess it really depends, doesn't it? Honestly, personally, I'd have to have a look at it, because on one hand, you have got definite powers, and quite a lot of them. But on the other hand, it is still that thing of, yeah, but you can never have any other powers other than those ones. And each time that you choose a new power, it is again, that is confirming, right, this Animite weakness is permanent. It's not when you're in amalgam mode, it's not when you're in combat, it's permanent. You will always take this Animite damage. Unlike normal amalgams, who it only ever multiplies based on the amount of power sources that they have. But your power sources are just technically within you always, a part of your power. So, it's kind of an interesting build, though, I guess. Very overpowered, but again, really interesting build. I don't think as I said, as long as it was in the right setting, I don't think I could say no to it, because it is so interesting. But yeah, I think that's about it, unless if anyone else needs to or wants to add anything else.
I think that's it. I think we can do it.
Okay, alright. Well, in that case, sorry for the noises that the boiler was making, but thank you very much for listening to this episode. This has been Create a Character Workshop. Yep, that's what we're calling it. Yep. I was thinking, is there anything cleverer? No.
Not yet.
I guess we could call it the Animite Tales Character Workshop. Thank you very much for listening, and have a wonderful night.
Bye.
See ya.
Ciao, ciao, for now.